The hero's journey is the fundamental structure of all storytelling. It is a cycle that most stories fit into, and Berserk is no exception. I don't know if many people understand what sets the story of Berserk into motion, so I wanted to cover that today. Despite the many variations of the cycle and different names for various stages of it, they all start with a call to action. The call to action is some sort of motion, some occurrence outside of the ordinary, that sends the protagonist out of his normal routine onto a grand adventure. I've divided the call to action into two types, external and internal. Berserk falls into the latter category, but I will quickly describe how I conceptualize this distinction. Things change around people, and sometimes these external forces send people on journeys that they never would have started without them. One example that immediately comes to mind is the story of Luke Skywalker, a timeless example of the hero's journey if we ignore the sequels, which I fully intend on doing. At the beginning of his story, Luke is an innocent farm boy stuck on a backwater planet that is part of a larger galactic empire. Luke is also ignorant of the cruel nature of the empire, and so when the empire kills his family in an effort to unearth the remnants of the republic it defeated, he is forced to confront a new reality. This type of call usually is cruel. Luke's family being killed is not an uncommon theme when it comes to external forces disrupting people's lives. A reason for this is the call must be something significant, significant enough to change one's world, enough to break the world that one inhabits and bring them into a new reality that is dangerous, uncertain, and uncomfortable. The hero then responds to the call by either trying to deny the new reality presented or embracing it and attempting to understand this new world that has been presented to them. The other category that I want to explore more deeply is the internal call to action. The internal call happens when the protagonist of the story realizes something that makes them see the world in a new light, and thus calls them to begin a journey to understand their new insight. In other words, an internal change to their psyche causes them to begin their journey, to either change themselves or to change the world. To understand this concept, let's look at the Divine Comedy by Dante. I want you to do a thought experiment with me. Imagine that one day you wake up and suddenly realize that God is real. God is real and he is perfectly good, just, and holy. The next thing that you realize is that you are very, very, very far from him. How would you feel? What would that make you want to do? Nothing about your physical circumstances would change, yet everything would be seen through a new perspective. This thought experiment is how the Divine Comedy starts, metaphorically. The protagonist wakes up in a dark forest and realizes that God is real and that God is a hell, a purgatory, and a heaven away from him. A crushing realization, to say the least. But what does he do? He starts traveling, because this realization is something that changes everything for him. There is no way he can go back to whatever he was doing before while at the same time harboring such knowledge. I think this would be true of anyone, no matter how much you already believe in God. I can't help but think that you would start to live differently. Nothing would ever be the same after that. This is what the internal call to action is, a realization that comes from within oneself and changes how one perceives reality in such a fundamental way that they can't help but live differently as well. They must begin a journey of understanding what this new perspective means for them. It could be argued that the story of Adam and Eve follows this type of call to action, with the start of their journey into mortality being the realization of their nakedness or uncleanliness before God via eating the fruit. If you have already noticed, this type of call to action is mostly spiritual or could potentially be romantic as well. Many religions preach that a certain amount of prayer or meditation is necessary so that one can break through one's current reality and see the world from the next plane until one reaches alignment with God, enlightenment, or whatever else is seen as the ultimate reality. Most popular media uses external forces because it is easier to understand why someone would want to change their life if their house blew up, as opposed to having an epiphany. Most superheroes use it when they gain their power, pretty much every shonen ever, as well in a similar way. Berserk does not. I believe that the true call to action of Berserk does not come until chapter 22, the Bonfire of Dreams, where Guts reveals an epiphany that sets the story of Berserk into motion. The Bonfire of Dreams is where the epiphany is revealed, but the reason that Guts has it is because of Griffith's speech in chapter 12, where he monologues to the princess about what it means to be a real person. Griffith believes that a person only becomes real once they become conscious of their own desires, which they then dedicate themselves to. He looks down on those who live out of instinct or those who follow the paths of others. Guts happens to overhear this, where we then get one of my favorite panels in all of manga. When I see this panel, I feel Guts' loneliness, confusion, and desire all wrapped into one moment. The distance between someone like Griffith and himself is suddenly revealed to him, that they are living on different planes of existence. What Guts realizes in this moment is not elucidated until the bonfire of dreams. As Guts looks out over a sea of bonfires, he realizes that he discovered something about himself as he listened to Griffith. Believe it or not, I actually prefer the 1990s anime adaptation in English of this monologue to the manga because it is a little more direct and hard-hitting.
So long as I have my sword to fight with, I'm sure to survive. Year after year, I prove it to be true. Before joining the Hawks, I always survived. No matter the odds, no matter how hopeless a losing battle. This time was no different. In truth, I don't believe that's any way to live one's life. I've been fighting in battles for as long as I can remember. The mercenary leader who raised me taught me nothing except how to wield a sword. I've never had anything except my sword. I don't want to die. For me, that is the only reason I keep fighting. There is nothing to save myself for or give myself to. I fight because I know nothing else. Once I was willing to do just that, to commit myself to fighting, and let anyone else find a reason for me.
I cannot get over how beautiful this monologue is. Haven't we all always survived? We are here, aren't we? And the fact that we are still, the fact that we have survived everything that has happened to us begs the question, why? Why did you survive? When things got tough, when the chips were down, why did you grit your teeth and keep moving forward? Guts arrives at a life-changing realization. He kept moving forward purely out of habit because that was what he had always done and nothing else. But as he says, that is no way to live one's life. That is how an animal lives. This realization changes everything because Guts now has a giant existential void within himself that he must fill. Guts' desire to find a reason to live, one that is the product of his whole person rather than just his instincts, is the internal call to action. Physically, nothing has changed for Guts. There was no power he obtained, no tragic event that shattered his life. Rather, it was a moment of self-reflection that made everything different, and suddenly he could no longer live as he had. To mirror this to the external call to action, his worldview was, rather than his world, disrupted so badly by this realization that it shattered, and he feels the call to build a new one. For me, this call to action is special because I think that everyone who lives Socrates' examined life must grapple with it, and probably more than once in their life. It's a question that will keep arising since we are creatures made up of instincts, rational desires, and subconscious desires that all push and pull us in different directions. And of course, all those things must be considered within the context of the world around us and the obligations that it has for us. It actually reminds me of a pivotal moment in Avatar: The Last Airbender, when Uncle Iroh tells Zuko, "It's time for you to look inward and begin asking yourself the big questions. Who are you and what do you want?" Iroh is desperately trying to get Zuko to think about whether what he is doing is actually what he wants, or whether he is following the path assigned to him at birth. Zuko is a character liked by so many because watching him grapple with an identity crisis speaks to the tension that everyone feels between the obligations that they find themselves within and their true self. Zuko finds that the demands of the Fire Nation do not line up with who he is at his core, so he abandons them to embrace his true nature, which is actually just a chill guy. To conclude, Guts is my favorite character in fiction because he is cool, but more importantly because he is real. I will never get tired of watching him pursue a reason to live, to claw and scratch, cry and bleed in the pursuit of something, anything to fill the hole in his heart. Anyways, thanks for watching my first video. I hope you guys learned something. Let me know what you think about my ideas.